They say time heals all wounds. But in the world of true crime, time often deepens a mystery. Years pass, evidence fades, witnesses forget, and the faces of missing slowly disappear from the front pages, replaced by newer stories, fresher tragedies. But the victims never stop waiting, and neither do the families. Some cases go unsolved for decades, sitting in dusty police archives, forgotten by everyone except those left behind. But every once in a while, a spark reignites the fire. A new tip, a technological leap, a guilty conscience. And suddenly, a case once thought unsolvable is back in the headlines. The truth clawing its way through years of silence. Justice catching up with the past. 2025 has already delivered a wave of jaw-dropping breakthroughs, answers to questions that haunted communities for years. Behind each cold case lies a story of pain, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of truth. And this year, for 5 families, the cold began to thaw. You're about to hear the latest real-world developments in some of the most haunting cases we thought might never be solved. Not from fiction, not from rumor, but from the very investigators, scientists, and survivors who refused to give up. From a girl who vanished into thin air and suddenly reappeared, to a murder that was finally solved by a dying man's confession. These aren't just stories of crime. They're stories of return, of discovery, of closure. Because even the deepest secrets have a way of being found. And in 2025, they are surfacing faster than ever. DNA technology is evolving. Facial recognition is sharper. Cold case units are smarter, better funded, and more relentless than ever before. In the shadows of long-forgotten crimes, light is finally starting to shine through. But as the truth emerges, so do darker questions. What kept these cases buried for so long? Who helped the guilty hide? And how many more answers are still locked away in evidence boxes waiting to be uncovered? Get ready to travel from the deserts of Arizona to the snowy streets of Michigan, into homes, alleys, and minds once filled with secrets. You may think you know cold cases. You may think some stories are over. But in 2025, justice is catching up, and the silence is breaking. This is 5 cold cases with recent breakthroughs in 2025. Let's begin. Case 1. The disappearance of Alicia Navarro. The truth finally comes out. She vanished in the middle of the night. No forced entry, no struggle, no goodbye. Just 14 years old, Alicia Navarro disappeared from her family's home in Glendale, Arizona, in September 2019. She left a note behind. "I ran away. I will be back. I swear." But she never returned. For years, her case baffled investigators. A quiet, smart girl on the autism spectrum, gone without a trace. Rumors swirled. Was she lured by someone online? Did she meet with a predator? Or was she just a runaway, lost in the cracks of an overwhelmed system? Then, in 2023, a miracle. Alicia walked into a police station in a remote Montana town and said 4 words that stunned the world. "I need to clear my record." Alive, safe, but cryptic. She claimed she had not been kidnapped, only that she'd been living with someone and wanted to go home. But something didn't add up. In the following months, Alicia was placed under protective care. Her family was overjoyed, but investigators quietly kept digging. And in 2025, the silence shattered. Thanks to newly authorized forensic tools and data access laws passed this year, investigators unlocked private communication apps previously believed impenetrable. Inside, they found hundreds of hidden messages between Alicia and an older man, a former long-haul trucker known only by his online alias, Red Coyote. That man, whose real name is being withheld pending trial, had allegedly groomed Alicia online for months before persuading her to run away. She was then moved across state lines, controlled emotionally and psychologically, and kept isolated for years. The 2025 breakthrough came not from new evidence, but from new technology. Law enforcement gained access to a decentralized app's encrypted archive previously thought inaccessible. Cross-referencing login locations and burner phones, they tracked 2 other individuals who helped hide Alicia during her disappearance. Both were arrested in February 2025. One of them had direct ties to a child trafficking ring stretching across 3 states. The public was shocked, not only because Alicia had reappeared 2 years earlier, but because the truth had been so much more disturbing than anyone expected. She hadn't just run away. She'd been manipulated, hidden, and silenced. Today, Alicia is working with counselors and investigators, helping them understand how it all happened. She's safe. She's speaking out, and she's no longer afraid. This case proves something chilling and powerful, that predators don't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes they hide in plain sight, behind usernames, screens, and fake kindness. But thanks to relentless investigation, a family's prayer was answered, and a hidden world of abuse was finally exposed. Case 2, the 1985 murder of Kathy Lamb, solved after 40 years. Greensboro, North Carolina, April 1985. Kathy Lamb was 26 years old, bright, independent, a recent college graduate with a love for poetry and photography. One evening, she didn't show up for work. Hours later, her landlord found her dead inside her apartment, strangled, bruised, and left lying near her desk. The scene was brutal, but strangely clean. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints. Whoever did this had come in quietly and vanished without a trace. Despite hundreds of interviews and multiple suspects over the years, the case went cold, and Kathy's name slowly faded into the long list of unsolved American murders. Until now, in January 2025, 40 years after her death, Kathy's case was cracked wide open, and it started with a single strand of hair. Back in the 80s, DNA analysis was still in its infancy. The sample taken from Kathy's apartment had been stored all this time, sealed in an evidence bag, waiting. In late 2024, a new forensic genealogy initiative was launched in North Carolina, targeting decades-old cold cases. The lab ran the sample through a national genetic genealogy database and got a partial match, a distant cousin. That match led to a family tree and eventually to a name, Gerald Price, a former high school janitor, now 76 years old, living just 2 towns away from where Kathy was murdered. Price had never been on the radar. No criminal record. No known connection to the victim. But when detectives dug into his past, they found something chilling. He had briefly worked at Kathy's university during the same semester she graduated, assigned to a maintenance crew that had keys to multiple campus buildings, including hers. Investigators obtained a DNA sample from Price's trash, and it matched the hair from the crime scene. When confronted, Price didn't deny it. He simply said, "I always knew you'd come," and then he confessed. In taped interviews, he admitted to following Kathy home after a brief encounter on campus. He claimed he felt mocked by her, that she looked right through him. What followed was a violent outburst of rage that ended in Kathy's death. It was random, senseless, a murder born from obsession and rejection. For Kathy's sister, who's now in her 60s, the news brought both pain and peace. "I didn't think I'd live long enough to hear someone say his name," she said. "But now I have, and so has the world." 40 years. That's how long justice waited. And it came not from a witness, not from a confession letter, but from one tiny, overlooked piece of evidence, waiting patiently in a sealed bag. This is the power of modern science. This is the persistence of cold case detectives. And this is how, in 2025, a silent voice finally got to speak again. Case 3, the Long Island Jane Doe, Baby Hope. Some cases don't start with a name. They start with silence. It was July 2003 when a highway maintenance worker discovered a small, blue cooler abandoned near a wooded stretch of the Southern State Parkway on Long Island. Inside were the remains of a child, a toddler, wrapped in a worn baby blanket. No identification. No missing persons report that matched. No parents coming forward. She became known only as Baby Hope. Just 2 years old, maybe 3, she had died violently, and someone had hidden her like trash. It was the kind of case that shook even hardened detectives. The medical examiner said she died from blunt force trauma, but that was all they had. No leads, no DNA matches, no surveillance footage, nothing. For over 2 decades, her photos sat on missing persons boards and in cold case files, reconstructed digitally with age regression software. posted on websites dedicated to the unidentified. But no one claimed her. Not one call, not one clue, until 2025. This year, everything changed. A new federal DNA mandate took effect in January, requiring all states to upload backlogged unidentified victim samples into a unified, nationwide registry using next-generation sequencing. Baby Hope's DNA was among the first entered. Within weeks, a hit came back. Not a parent, not a sibling, but a cousin, a second-degree relative, who had recently submitted her DNA to a popular ancestry site as part of a family tree project. Investigators traced a connection back to a Pennsylvania woman named Margot Delgado, who, in 2002, had reported her 2-year-old daughter missing, but had told police it was a custody issue and then never followed up. The case had quietly been closed. Margot moved states, changed jobs, and started over. When questioned, she claimed she didn't remember what happened to her daughter, that she'd given her to someone to care for her, that she didn't know the child had died. But police didn't buy it. Inside her former residence, now abandoned, investigators found a hidden photo album in the attic crawl space, sealed in plastic. In it were pictures of the girl, smiling and small, playing with toys that matched the ones found beside her remains in the cooler. Then came the final blow. Forensic analysis matched fibers from the blanket Baby Hope had been wrapped into a rug that had once covered Margot's apartment floor. The case, once built on shadows, now had formed. Margot Delgado was arrested in March 2025 and charged with second-degree murder, unlawful disposal of a body, and obstruction. She is now awaiting trial. And Baby Hope? She finally has a name, Natalie Delgado. She was 2 years and 4 months old when she died. Her favorite color was pink. She liked peanut butter sandwiches. She loved the cartoon Blue's Clues. And she had been alone in her final moments. Her case had haunted investigators for more than 20 years. Now they had closure, and so did the public. A funeral was held in her honor in Nassau County, where she was reburied under her real name. Hundreds attended. Some brought stuffed animals. Others brought flowers. Most brought tears. One detective said it best. She was everyone's daughter. That's why we never gave up. The case of Baby Hope speaks to something deeper than just crime. It's about the voiceless, the forgotten, the children who never got to grow up, and the stories that never got to be told. But it also speaks of persistence and the slow but unstoppable power of truth. The 2025 breakthrough wasn't dramatic. There was no anonymous tip, no sudden confession. It was science, patience, data, the culmination of 22 years of questions, answered in a matter of weeks, once the right tools were finally in place. As more states comply with the federal DNA registry mandate, many believe this is just the beginning. Cold cases involving unidentified victims, once considered impossible to solve, are finally being reopened and re-examined. For Baby Hope, or rather, for Natalie, it came just in time. She no longer lies in an unmarked grave. She has an identity, a family, a voice, and a world that finally knows her story. This is what justice looks like in 2025. Not fast, not perfect, but real. And for one little girl, whose life was stolen and hid away in a cooler on the side of a highway, justice finally found its way home. Case 4, the Butcher Park Jane Doe, a breakthrough from the grave. Sacramento, California, November 1997. A city worker was trimming shrubs near the edge of Butcher Park, a quiet patch of green surrounded by suburbia, when he stumbled upon something buried just inches beneath the soil. A shallow grave. Inside, the remains of a young woman. She had been bound at the wrist with frayed rope, her skull fractured from blunt force trauma. The grave was makeshift, hurried. Someone wanted her hidden, not found. There was no ID, no purse, no cell phone, just a faded necklace with a tiny dolphin charm. She was estimated to be between 18 and 25, but police couldn't match her to any local missing person. Her face had decayed beyond recognition. Dental records offered no match. She became the Butcher Park Jane Doe. For more than 25 years, her case remained unsolved. Flyers with facial reconstructions came and went. Artists try to recreate what she might have looked like in life. Hopeful eyes, soft jawline, shoulder-length hair. Still, no one came forward. No one claimed her. No one remembered her. Until now, in April 2025, her name was finally spoken again. And for the first time, it wasn't Jane. It was Melanie Russo. She was 19 years old when she disappeared in the fall of 1997. She had left her apartment in Oakland to meet a friend for dinner. She never arrived. Her disappearance was never properly reported. Why? Because no one was looking for her. Melanie had aged out of the foster system just months earlier. She had no immediate family, no steady job, and no permanent address. She'd slipped through every crack imaginable, and her life ended in the dirt behind a park fence. So, how did she finally get identified? It began with a new kind of exhumation. In January 2025, the California Department of Justice launched a statewide initiative to retest all unidentified bodies buried between 1970 and 2000. Using improved DNA extraction methods, a forensic team was able to collect mitochondrial DNA from Jane Doe's degraded remains, something that wasn't possible just a decade ago. That DNA was uploaded to a nationwide genealogical mapping database. Months passed, and then a match. A third cousin living in Denver, Colorado, had submitted her DNA to an ancestry site to trace her maternal roots. The match was distant, but it was a thread. Investigators followed the family tree backward, from a cousin to her mother to a second cousin, and finally to a name that hadn't appeared in any government system since 1997, Melanie Russo. Further research confirmed it. Hospital birth records, school enrollment data, and a single surviving yearbook photo. When compared to the facial reconstruction, the resemblance was undeniable. But identification wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Now that they had a name, detectives started digging into Melanie's final days. Witnesses were re-interviewed. Landlords were tracked down. One, now 78 years old, remembered a man who used to wait outside Melanie's apartment in an old Chevy Nova. Said he gave off a weird vibe. Always watching. Always quiet. That man's name? Wesley Pike, a former HVAC repairman who had worked in the area at the time of Melanie's disappearance. No criminal record. No known connection to Melanie. At least not on paper. But a subpoena of phone records from a now-defunct landline company showed that Pike had called Melanie's number dozens of times in the month before she vanished. And when investigators interviewed a former co-worker of Pike's in March 2025, they got the missing piece. The co-worker said Pike once confided in him during a drunken night that he messed up bad with girl and that she didn't make it. It was vague. It was years old, but it was enough for police to bring Pike in for questioning. At first, he denied knowing her. Then he claimed he might have seen her around. And then, after hours of interrogation, he broke. He admitted he'd become obsessed with Melanie, had seen her at a laundromat, followed her, tried to talk to her. She ignored him, rejected him, told him to leave her alone. One night, he waited outside her apartment. When she came home, he confronted her. He claimed he just wanted to talk, but things escalated fast. He hit her. She fell. She stopped moving. In his panic, he drove her body to Butcher Park, a place he used to take his dog as a kid, and buried her under loose dirt and leaves. He never told anyone, never got caught, never looked back. Until now, Wesley Pike was arrested in April 2025, charged with first-degree murder. He's now facing life in prison. And Melanie Russo, once an invisible victim, finally has a voice. Her case reminds us of all the young women who slipped through the cracks. No family, no money, no safety net, and for years, no name. But in 2025, forensic science reached into the past and pulled her out. She is no longer forgotten, no longer nameless, and her killer can no longer hide. Case 5, the cold case of Rebecca Hill, cracked by AI in 2025. Portland, Oregon, January 2010. Rebecca Hill was 32 years old, a software engineer, mother of one, and by all accounts, living a normal, quiet life. One morning, she left her apartment to go jogging, as she did every Tuesday before work. She never came home. Her body was found later that afternoon, partially concealed beneath a pile of brush in Forest Park, not far from a running trail. She had been strangled. There were signs of a struggle, defensive wounds, and DNA under her fingernails. But the DNA didn't match anyone in the criminal database. No surveillance cameras caught her final moments. No witnesses saw anything. No phone records, no obvious enemies, no recent arguments. Just a woman who went out for a run and never came back. The police followed every lead. Friends, ex-partners, co-workers, all cleared. The trail went cold. For 15 years, Rebecca's murder remained a mystery. That is, until 2025, when a quiet revolution in crime-solving began. AI-powered forensic profiling. Developed by a tech startup in Seattle, this new software didn't just analyze DNA. It studied behavioral patterns, micro-movements and archived surveillance footage, purchase histories, social graphs, and even speech patterns. The system used advanced machine learning to look at unsolved crimes and ask, what's missing? Portland PD partnered with the project as part of a 2025 cold case initiative. Rebecca's case was one of 30 files submitted for review. The AI flagged something strange. A tiny, overlooked camera from a gas station 3 blocks from the trailhead. The footage had been previously dismissed. It only captured cars driving by, and no sign of Rebecca was ever seen. But the AI noticed a pattern in the cars that passed by the trail between 5:15 and 5:45 a.m., Rebecca's usual running window. One car, a silver 2005 Saturn Ion, showed up on multiple Tuesdays in the months leading up to her death, always at the same time, always taking the same route. Police traced the license plate to a man named Evan Mercer. At the time, Mercer was a security guard at a nearby corporate campus. He had no record, no connection to Rebecca, and had never been interviewed during the investigation. But when detectives pulled his background, things got darker. In 2008, he had been cited for trespassing at a women's running track. But the charge was dropped. In 2012, 2 years after Rebecca's murder, he abruptly left Oregon and moved to Alaska. He'd lived under the radar ever since. Detectives visited him in April 2025. They didn't accuse him. Not yet. They asked him questions, watched his behavior, took note of inconsistencies. Then they obtained a warrant for his DNA and matched it to the skin found under Rebecca Hill's fingernails. The probability of error? Less than 1 in 5.7 trillion. When confronted, Mercer didn't speak at first. Then he tried to spin it, said he'd seen her fall, tried to help, touched her hands. But the autopsy showed otherwise. She fought hard. The evidence didn't match his story. Faced with the facts, Mercer broke down. He admitted he had been following her for weeks. He said he was drawn to her energy. He wanted to talk to her, to connect. But when she rejected him and told him to leave her alone, something inside him snapped. He followed her into the woods. And what happened next, he never truly explained. Only that it got out of hand. Mercer was arrested on April 12, 2025. He now faces charges for murder in the first degree. But this case isn't just about closure. It's about how closure was finally achieved. 15 years of detective work, dozens of hours combing through evidence, all stalled until an artificial intelligence model noticed what human eyes had missed. A pattern, a routine, a small silver car. That's what broke the case open. And for Rebecca's family, especially her son, now 21, it was an answer they feared would never come. He told reporters, "It's weird to say thank you to a machine, but I do, because that machine gave me my mom's story back." Rebecca's case is now being used as a training model for other AI crime tools, helping departments across the country reanalyze thousands of unsolved files with fresh eyes, digital ones. It's the beginning of a new era in criminal justice, where time, data, and technology meet, where silence doesn't get the final word, and where sometimes justice just needs a little code. 5 cold cases, 5 lives frozen in time until something or someone shattered the silence. Whether it was new DNA testing, brave witnesses coming forward, or the rise of artificial intelligence, 2025 has proven one thing: no secret stays buried forever. But for every breakthrough, there are hundreds of families still waiting, still wondering, still hoping. If these stories moved you, don't let the conversation stop here. Share this video. You never know who might hold the missing piece to another cold case. If you recognize a name, a place, or a detail, even if it seems small, contact your local authorities or Crime Stoppers and tell us in the comments, which case hit you the hardest? What should we cover next? Here at True Crime Stories, we believe every voice matters, especially the ones that were silenced. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and never stop asking questions. This is True Crime Stories. See you in the next one.